Alright, so we're going to start at line 142. Previously, to review what we have just talked about, is that Juno has approached Aeolus and asked that king of the winds that he release those winds, attack Aeneas' ships, destroying them, thereby thwarting Aeneas from actually being successful in his mission, getting to Latium, starting the Latin race, that one day, then hundreds of years later, would be the city of Rome, the civilization that would end up destroying her favorite, which is Carthage. Those winds are released. They do exactly what they are supposed to do, as told to them by Aeolus. They wreck the Aenean ships. They then, of course, the people, the sailors and soldiers with Aeneas are thrown about all over the place. Ships are destroyed. There's debris all over the water. And then, with all of that ruckus going on, you have essentially Neptune, the god of the seas, not liking the fact that obviously his role and his territory is being stepped on by the winds. And so he comes, he lectures the winds, he tells them to run back to their house, and to, most importantly, tell your king to stay the bleep out of my territory. And so now in line 142, we then are going to begin with the cleanup, as it were, as led by Neptune. Seek ite. Now this word we have seen before, ite, simply means he said. And seek, of course, is in such a way. In such a way he spoke. In such a way he said. And so that way, as people who are listening to the Aeneid, it would tell you that the talking, the quote, as we can obviously see here with quotations, is over. So thus he spoke, and he placates. Now that word, placo, placare, and I know when I say these principal parts, you say them with me behind the muted microphone at home. When you get here, those of you who are in person, you are going to be saying them. Nevertheless, placo, placare, he placates, he makes satisfied or calms down. The tumida iquora, again, that means the equalness, but we've seen by metonymy that it's the equal levelness of the ocean, and so therefore it's the sea. The tumid seas. The word tumid means swollen, as it were, and he does so, not kitus, which would be quick, but kitius, which is the word, obviously, faster, more quickly. You can see this word, actually, in the motto of the Olympics, which is altius, higher, kitius, more quickly or faster, fortius, which is more strongly. And so therefore that Latin motto embodies all the things that Olympic athletes should be able to do. And whenever you have a comparative, you either need to look for a quam, which is going to mean than, or you can look for the ablative, which, as we all know, ablatives translate by, with, because of, from, in, on, at, than. So more quickly than a thing having been spoken, a word. So he calms the swollen seas, que, and now, fugo fugare, a first conjugation, go ahead and say it, fugo fugare.
Fugo fugare.
There we are. Is better, or is different than fugio fugare. Fugio fugare, a third io, means to run away, escape. Fugo fugare means you cause someone to run away or escape. To put to flight, which would be a way an old British person would say it. So, and he puts to flight, he drives away the clouds. The ones, perfect passive participle, having been collected all together. And he leads back the sun. And so he makes it nice and all in clear. And at the same time, together, Cymothoe, who is a sea nymph, and Triton, who is the son of Neptune with his wife Amphitrite, having leaned upon ad nixus nitor niti nixus, having leaned upon, implied the ships, having leaned upon those ships, they uproot, they shove off those ships by, with, because of, from, in, on, at. From is going to be the right word here. Shoves off those ships from the sharp crag. There are two words. One is the word rupus, that means crag, but you also have scopulus, which means crag. But a crag, remember, is a jagged outcropping, as it were. And he himself lifts them up. Now, the he himself is going to be referring to Neptune. And this is levo levare, and obviously you get the word levitate. That comes from it. And this is what students often make a mistake with. They say he himself lifts up the trident. No. A tridentum would be the direct object. Instead, he himself lifts up, implied those ships, tridenti, which is I stem ablative, with his trident. So he takes his trident and uses it kind of like a lever. And he opens up aperire, the vast shoals. The huge shoals, remember, is a shallow area. And he tempers. He makes calm the sea, which is a neuter word. That is why it has that odd form, even though it is accusative. And this is one of my favorite verbs in all of Latin. It's labor. Not the word that means to work, but rather the word that means to glide or to slip. It is, and let's say the principal parts, you will say it behind your muted microphone. Labor, labi, lapsusum. And of course we get the word like lapse. A lapse is a slip, or a lapsus linguae, a slip of the tongue. Here, I think it's going to be that he glides. It's deponent, looks passive, translates actively. And he glides through the sumas undas, the highest waves, rotis levibus, with ablative light, levis leve means light, wheels. And he glides through the highest waves with light wheels. It's though he's just cruising right along. Now at this point we have an incredibly famous section of the Aeneid, and it is something that Virgil and all epics very often feature, and that is a simile. Now remember that whenever you see the word ut, and you see the ut that is right there, you are looking for an subjunctive. If there's not, it's translated as. Do not mind the fact that the I is on the end of the ut, and do not mind the fact that the well is on the end of the ut, but it essentially tells us that we're beginning a simile. And so the word as, or like, or just like. And I like just like for myself here. And just like veluti. So, and just like cum. Now, here's cum, there's not an ablative, and we have a indicative verb. I know it's indicative. This is from the verb. Let's all say it together, please, everybody. Orior.
Orior.
Oh boy. Oriri.
Oriri.
Or to assume.
To sing.
Which of course means to rise. Do not mind the fact that it has a prefix. Very often in real Latin, whenever a verb has a prefix, it doesn't really change the meaning, it sometimes just intensifies it. So, something has arisen. Looks passive, translates actively. Not has been, but has. So, and just like, when often, and we have to find out what is the feminine thing that has arisen. Now, there are two types of verbs that give tons of problems to Latin students. Or I should say nouns, not verbs. One are my tas tatis nouns. And you can see why. In the nominative, it ends with tas, and then the genitive is tatis. You have, like, for example, tempestas, tempestatis, brevitas, brevitatis, pietas, pietatis. But the way you can usually figure out that it's nominative is that if you can replace the os with a y and make it an English word, brevitas, brevity, sagacitas, sagacity, pietas, piety, then essentially it's the nominative of the tas tatis noun, per declension. Another one are nouns like that right there. So, say the word with me at home in the comfort and privacy of your own muted microphone. Seditio. And then when you have these words that will end tio very often, or sometimes co, that is the nominative, and then it'll be tionis. And so if on those words, if ever you see something ending with an O, and if you were to put an N on the end of it, and it creates an English word, sedition in this case, then it is nominative. And that's how very often you can tell whether it is the nominative variant with the ending O, and it's not really an ending, or whether it actually is the ending O that we see in Magno Populo. So, what is a sedition? It's a rebellion, an uprising, as it were. So, and just like when often a uprising, a rebellion, a riot has arisen in a large population, this is going to be something that Virgil's audience would be acutely aware of. Because remember that Virgil's audience have lived in the time of higglediness and pigglediness, in the time of civil war, in the time of unrest. They have lived through They have lived through the proscriptions of Sulla. Remember that when he became dictator, he put lists of names on the actual speaker's platform, the rostra. And from that list of names, it was essentially a murder list. An ability or a willingness to simply go and kill everybody who was on that list. This is horrible. And then they took the heads of these people and put them on stakes and lined the forum with it. Horrible time to live with. And so the audience of Virgil would have known about uprisings and riots. Que and the ignobile vulgus. Vulgus is the crowd. Vulgar language is the language that the crowd uses. That's why the Bible is called the Vulgate. It's written in the version of Latin, vulgar Latin, that people would have spoken. We would like to call it colloquial. And so therefore, it is the crowd. And they are not noble, ignoble. And the ignoble crowd rages, becomes savage, silent, in their mind. And now, torches, facus, F-A-X is the nominative, facus. And that is why the document that you see when it comes to the convention is called the fox. It is the torch that lights the way to see all of the things that you can do at the convention. And now torches and rocks, we have seen that word before. Remember, a saxifrage is one who has broken rocks. They fly. Wola volare, not to be confused with wola wele. And we're describing, obviously, the kind of melee that goes on during an uprising. And madness, furor, it administers, it governs the arms. And what does that mean when madness governs the arms? Well, it means that the craziness, the rage that the crowd is experiencing. And so this simile is comparing all of the melee and all of the trouble and the rioting that the winds have caused. And so madness administers the arms. Then, though, in the midst of this melee, if, and this word is not the word for strong, it means by chance. Fors fortis. If, by chance, they have spotted, alternate ending, spicio, spicere, spexi, spectus, quem verum. Now, do you see the C? Do you see the quem? Si nisi numine, all the ollies fall away. Si nisi numine, ollie goes on holiday. And so this isn't quem, it's aliquem. And that means, of course, some or any. If by chance they have spotted some dude, some man, any man, and of course this is an illusion to somebody who can control the crowd, an illusion who can bring stability. At the time of Virgil, who that fellow would be? Augustus, perhaps. Aeneas himself. And so, if by chance they have spotted some dude, but he isn't just some dude, he's some dude ground, serious. And then these are your ablatives to tell in what way that adjective is applicable, because you can be serious in several ways. But he is serious in his pietas, pietate, and he is serious in his merits. Literally the things having been earned. Mereo merere. And these, like I said, when they explain the adjective, are called the ablative of specification. So if they spot that guy, they're getting out of hand, they grow silent. It's kind of like you could think of maybe a bunch of kids causing a ruckus and not obeying the teacher. And all of a sudden, the boss man walks in. Mr. Chur, they get in line. It's the way that I know in my children in elementary school. It's one thing to live in fear and respect the teacher, but man, when you're talking about the principal, they got the authority. And so that's what it's like here. They see those some fellow, by chance, they become silent. And they stand, sto stare steady status, with their ears, auribus, this part of the ear, right here, this part of the ear is called the auricle. I would give a short anecdote, but we're recording this. But it involved, I was being checked out by a physician's assistant or something like that, and she was doing something, looking into my ears and whatnot, and I was like, hey, isn't this called the auricle? And she said, oh heaven, don't ask me anatomy. What? I'm like, did you go to school for that? At any rate. And so here, ears having been erected. They stand with erect ears. And that guy, meaning the fellow they spotted, he rules, rego or regere, their minds, accusative direct object, with his words, with his things having been said. And we've had that verb before, mulkeo mulcere, he soothes their chests. He calms their hearts. Now, in line 154, and let me scroll so you can see a little bit better, the first word lets us know that we are no longer in the simile. And that word is seek. It means in such a way. So we've just said, just like, when this happens, in that way, in this way, in such a way, the cunctus fragor. The whole, we actually got that word in chapter 11, Ege Romani. It means all or whole. Fragor, the whole crashing of the sea. The word pelagus means sea. That's why it's an archipelago. And that's why some sharks who swim in the open sea are known as pelagic sharks. So another word for sea, pelagus. The whole crashing of the sea fell. Kado, kadere, kikidi, kasus. And so in the way that, of course, this fellow has come in and calmed the crowd and all of their yelling and all of their rioting, just like that, the whole sea fell. And thus Neptune is the man, is the god, being compared in that simile to the fellow who calms the riot. And afterwards, he, meaning Neptune, that's our guy, seeing or looking out, prospiciens, looking out the seas, in other words, looking out on the seas implied, and that he's referred to is Neptune as the Gainator. This word means father, and it's like the way we would refer to in the Aeneid Jupiter as being Gainator, the creator. And he is the creator of many things in the sea, both in a biological sense and in obviously a fabricational sense. So, and afterwards, the father, meaning Neptune, looking out on the seas and having been carried in, again this word vectus, we see it over and over. It is from the verb veho, vehere, vexi, vectus, and it means to carry. It's where we get the word vehicle, it's where we get the word vector, and the list goes on. Having been carried in from the open sky, caelo aperto, aperio aperire, he bends his horses. How do you bend your horse? Flecto flectore, flexi flexus, he turns them. He's cruising. He bends his horses, clad, and flying, again, volo volare, different than volo vele, he gives the reins, Laura, those are the leather straps, as it were. He gives his reins, secundu, and then that kuru is really kurui. It is an archaic form that Virgil uses that essentially is in the dative case, even though it looks ablative with the U. You have to understand it of being a UI. And it's being modified by secundo, and it's the indirect object that receives those reins. And flying, he gives the reins to the, not second chariot, but more so, this also can mean following, as in favoring. And it's a following chariot, because essentially, Neptune here is riding on autopilot. You know when you're driving your car and you don't have your hands on 10 and 2, and instead you got like one hand on the wheel, and you got the other elbow out, and you're just cruising along, and really you're letting the car drive itself. It's exactly what Neptune is doing. He's cleaned it all up, and now he is surveying his domain in the way that it is. All right, so we're going to stop there.